Hey everyone, welcome to Keto and Krime. Today we have a special treat. We're going to talk about the new Casey Anthony docuseries on Peacock/NBC, Where the Truth Lies. And I have got my very good friend Roberta Glass from the Roberta Glass True Crime podcast and YouTube channel. Roberta Glass True Crime Report podcast and YouTube channel. And Roberta, tell my subscribers a little bit about yourself, and we'll get started here.
I am a trial junkie. I covered the Nexium trial from the early hearings onto Keith Raniere's trial. Then from that, I went on to Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, and I covered that from the courtroom. And then Larry Ray, which is my alma mater, the Sarah Lawrence College cult case, and I covered that trial, which was the most amazing case. He still hasn't been sentenced yet, so.
When I first started listening to you, and I'm a huge fan, by the way, she has a great channel. You should definitely go over and check it out. I'll post everything down below in the description. But I really thought you must have been when I first started listening to you, I said, this lady either has to be a retired lawyer, a trial lawyer, something, because you just know way too much about it.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I just I guess you learn as you go, but I still have so much more to learn. As much as you think there's always so much more to learn. Let's get into this, Casey.
Let's get into this.
I have pages and pages of crazy notes on this thing. I am ready to go and talk about this in detail.
Well, for the people out there that don't know, we're going to be talking about Casey Anthony. This is a 2008 case that took several years to get the verdict. It was a not guilty verdict, but this was one of the most outlandish cases of child murder that has ever been. Casey Anthony was 21 at the time that her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee, disappeared, was missing for 31 days from June 16th to July 16th, 2008, was never reported missing. And then when she was arrested, she spun a tale that involved a babysitter that did not exist. She even brought the actress Juliette Lewis into it, not the actress, but used the name Juliette Lewis, saying that was a friend of hers that had seen Kaylee alive. This is a case of a compulsive liar, and it's kind of like the O.J. Simpson trial. We all know what's real, but what the court decided or what the jury decided and what we all kind of know to exist was kind of the opposite. And now, 20 years later, NBC decides they're going to come out and sent for her. I've always said that there's two kinds of documentaries, one with an agenda and one without an agenda. This one has an agenda.
Oh, it has an agenda. And what's interesting about this case is everyone was watching it at the time, or many, many Americans, exactly like you said, like the O.J. Simpson trial. So the people that watched the trial are outraged by this documentary. And I believe the people that are believing her and she's getting supporters from this documentary, I believe are people who are very young and can be swayed. So there's two ways you can do these, two ways you can really get over on the public. You can have a big PR campaign, which this defense never really had a big PR campaign. They definitely courted the press, but they didn't have this kind of intense PR campaign that you see with like the Johnny Depp trial or something else. This was like just everybody was talking about it. So people really know the facts of this case. It's harder to know the public. It's harder. So what she's coming out and saying in this documentary is that her father did it. She was a victim of her father. She was also a victim of her brother too.
Yeah, and I don't think that ever came out in the original trial. She never said anything about Lee, the older brother, and now all of a sudden he abused her too.
I thought that's who they were talking about in the documentary, but I could be
no.
Wrong. I mean, I was like, I wrote in my notes, "Where's the father?" Was that what they were talking about? Was I?
Yeah, they were talking about, like, in the trial. Her defense attorney, her lead attorney, did not consent to be interviewed for this documentary, which I thought was just really weird. But during the trial, he tried to put, the father, George Anthony, up as the murderer. So same here, but also used the abuse defense. But they never mentioned the older brother. The older brother was never mentioned in the trial, but now all of a sudden in the documentary, he's abused her too.
Right. And you were mentioning, you're talking about Juliette Lewis. In the beginning, she blamed this crime. She said she left her kid with a nanny.
Zanny the nanny.
Gonzalez. Wait, she had a middle name. Fernandez
Gonzalez.
It just reminds me of Austin Powers, where he says, like, this is my wife, Oprah, and my friend, Richard Cunningham, or whatever. It's like that ridiculous. But she is someone who will commit to her lies. So she also said she was working at Universal Studios. So she took the cops to Universal Studios, was waving to people, and they were like all confused, like, what is this? We don't, okay, hi. Yep. Maybe thinking she was like a little touched or a little odd, it's a little strange. And then she had to say, and then eventually, so she will only admit that she's lying when she's pressed into a corner and the facts are right in front of her face and there's nowhere for her to go. So in this, the documentary is the perfect platform for her because there's no one who's going to press her. Sure, you can ask a tough question, but she's ready for those tough questions. We haven't seen the outtakes. They edited this together. She looks like everything is everybody else's fault.
Yeah,
she lied.
She's Miss Innocence.
Her father was telling her to lie. But there's this huge contradiction. So she was never worried about where her daughter was in the 31 days that she was getting a tattoo, going out and partying, et cetera, et cetera. But she was also following the instructions of her father and asking him where her daughter was, and her father was saying fine, and she said, I was terrified of my father. So this man that you're terrified of is saying he has your daughter's fine and that you will be reunited, which I find a very weird term.
Well, she made it sound ominous, like, okay, I'm going to send you to join her soon. That's kind of how I took it. Okay,
that's interesting, right?
I'm not saying
you'll be reunited someday, some way. You'll get the key.
Yeah,
all
exactly.
The keys will come together.
Exactly. Now, I'm not saying that Casey Anthony was not abused growing up. I'm not saying that never happened, but that is not an excuse to kill your child or to not report your child as missing. And the whole idea that, okay, at the trial, they originally tried to blame George. Then they put forth the whole swimming pool theory that she drowned in the swimming pool and then he just buried her, which that makes no sense. Children drowning in swimming pools is the leading cause of child death in Florida. If that had happened, you would have just called 911. Right. So, yeah. And then, it's just, she was like, so her whole theory, the theory that she puts forth is that her father was abusing Kaylee and, smothered her and knocked her out, and then it just went too far. That's essentially the theory they're trying to put forward.
But the problem with if he buried her, why would he leave her in Kaylee's car?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's so much so that it reeks of death before. If you're burying, wouldn't you want to do it right away before that happens?
I mean, you and I, if there's ever a murder anywhere in the vicinity of both of us, we're probably going to get fingered because you and I could probably hide a body and get away with it. We know how.
We all think we can. It's really hard to do.
Yeah.
We all think we can do it, right? But she's also saying that my father was a police officer, so he knew all the tricks. Like it's a very interesting thing. I was talking about the Menendez brothers and to bring up abuse into this. Because abuse is especially this kind of sexual abuse is such a sensitive topic. You don't want to disbelieve anybody, but that's not what she was on trial for. That's not what her father was on trial for. And she brings up in the documentary that she could still press charges against her father. Why not? Instead, she wants to try him via documentary. And what I've learned about true crime, if anybody wants to try a case via documentary and not the courts, really, really be very skeptical because there's no, I'm looking for the word like you don't get into any trouble for lying in a documentary, right?
Right. Because they're
But on the stand,
essentially
under
opinion
oath,
pieces. Opinion pieces.
cross-examination, there's
Yeah.
no real heavy cross-examination.
Right. Exactly.
And
And
what?
so
And I
I
have
don't
a
even
theory.
understand her motives unless she's trying to reach, like you said, a whole new audience of people that doesn't know anything about this case, that are not like you, I, and the majority of people, age 30 and older, that know the facts of this case and know she's full of bullshit.
I
She's
think these innocent advocacy
Mhm.
movements are really for people who are young and haven't lived life. That is what I think. But why do you think that she's focusing so much on her? I know that it was the
Mhm.
center to the case, but her father. But she seems to really relish in bringing up her father's affair, and her father stole $20. Meanwhile, she stole her friend's while her daughter was missing. She's, excuse me, stole her friend's checkbook and was using it.
Over a thousand
$20
dollars
in
in
time,
checks.
right?
So
Like, it's like, well, I may have stolen thousands of dollars, but I was in trauma, and
Mhm.
there's no. Why do you think she's so stuck on her father as the villain in this? What is her vendetta against her father?
I have two theories. One, I think she just absolutely despises her own family. I mean, that's pretty obvious. I don't think she has any love for her father, her brother, or her mother. And so I think the father is just a convenient way to bring them down. And the other is, I just think that he was kind of painted by the media at the time as a co-villain in so many ways. And I think it's the easiest person to blame because people really don't have a high opinion of him anyway. I mean,
Right, you're not going to like some guy who cheats on his wife. My
exactly.
my theory is that he wouldn't lie for her on the stand. This is I could be persuaded. I think your theories are very good. I think there may be an element of that. Remember the mother made up that lie that I was
Mhm,
looking for chlorophyll about the
mhm,
dogs. I didn't want the dogs to be poisoned,
mhm.
to make up a reason for this chloroform
Yep.
search. And I believe her father, they make a big deal that her father testified against her, but had he refused to testify, wouldn't he have been subpoenaed and been brought in there to testify anyway?
Yeah, I mean, if they really wanted to hear what he had to say, either side could have forced him to testify. Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt about it. I was like, what do you think? But she's
Yeah.
not mad at her, and it doesn't seem to have any. Her mother is hardly mentioned in this
No.
documentary, except for the fact that she said, my mother didn't want me to sexualize myself and be a sexual young woman. Who wants their daughter to dress like a whore? Who
Yeah,
does?
exactly.
But she said, I
And
was a great mother because I let my daughter eat what she wanted within reason and
mhm.
dress the way she wanted. So her idea of being a good mother is being a mother who can let her child or daughter dress however she wants.
To be more of a friend than a parent. So I think
Yeah.
she resented that maybe her mother and her father may have attempted to parent her at some point in her life. I mean, if you look at Lee Anthony, the older brother, he turned out very well. Has held the same job for over 10 years, very successful in what he does. And then
That's
you look at
interesting.
her. I mean, I don't know. It's just
He's
I think
working
there's
for
just
the defense team, and
yeah.
and the defense investigator goes, "I trust
Mhm.
Casey totally." And I thought to myself, this guy is used to being around some of the worst people. She must seem not so bad compared to some of the people he's dealt with. If
Well,
that's true, I don't even know how long, if that job was created for the documentary or not. I mean,
yeah.
they
Well,
rented this house. She didn't want to use her own house
I know
for
because her
safety
roommate's
reasons.
privacy is very important.
But
Okay,
you
go
know
ahead.
what I mean? I didn't know if that was set up to make her look trustworthy and like she had an aim in life, but I
Yeah.
don't know if she really does do that job. But they they certainly really wanted to hammer home the fact that she's no longer a liar. She's grown out of it because she's had so much therapy.
Yeah. But everything she said during the original investigation was a lie from working at, and even in the documentary, one lie I caught her in when she was, she pulled up outside Universal Studios and was telling them that she had worked there as an independent contractor for Kodak. She was in the kiosk where you take, you want me to take, you take a picture and try to sell the picture to somebody. Okay, that's what she did. Now, during the original case log, what had happened is she did not, after she got had Kaylee, she did not return after maternity leave. They tried to reach her several times, and she just never responded, so they terminated her. And in the documentary, she said that she left when Kodak lost the contract and another company came in. So that's a lie right there. She was terminated by Eastman Kodak for not returning from maternity leave. And that was in the original police report and case trial.
They do. They also say, well, George, they get the detective to admit, well, George lied to me. Pretty much everybody lies to me. But do they lie this often when their daughter and never look for their daughter?
Yeah.
If you don't, I mean, think about I always say this with the McCann case, because those parents didn't look for Madeline either. When have you ever lost something? I'm talking about a bank card, a wallet, a cat, a dog, a book, even, that if it matters to you, you look for it. Either if you're not looking, it's either you know where it is, you don't care, or it's not important to you, right? I mean,
my
she
theory,
never looked for her daughter. In fact, she was celebrating. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Now, my theory has always been the same, that she was using chloroform or Xanax or some kind of, downer to sedate Kaylee so she could go out and live her life. And she probably used a little too much and it killed her. And so they panicked. She panicked and buried her.
I believe that's true. I believe that's true. It's also what the jail informant says.
Mm-hmm. And what the judge in the case 2 years afterwards said it was his theory.
True. I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too. I mean, think about it. If you have a kid before you're really ready,
mm-hmm.
and her idea, but her friend says, I just have to ask you this, Tracy. She says, there's a picture of Casey with her head in the toilet. And her friend says, it was her 21st birthday. Come on. I don't know anyone who has a picture taken of them with their head in the toilet throwing up because they're so drunk. Like it's a norm, like, whoa, she turned 21. Of course, you're going to have a picture of you throwing up in the toilet. Of course, maybe you drink too much, but have a picture of yourself throwing up in the toilet.
I had a picture taken of myself holding 2 martinis, a martini in each hand, but I would never put my head in a toilet. And I don't know anybody that would.
Right. Don't ask me about the big ecstasy party at Sarah Lawrence in 1993 either. There might be some pictures of me there. But but I'm just saying, I think that's very extreme. And that's saying that you'll drink to a really excessive level and want to and document it. I don't know who documented it, but I think it's kind of a little bit not the norm. But she's like, come on, who doesn't have that picture? I have mine in my wallet. I thought she was going to take hers out. This is my 21st birthday. There's just so many odd things. Now, Casey says that she's blunt and brutally honest, and it's impossible for her life. She's too honest. She's so honest, it's painful. I was saying to you, we were talking before we started, it's not I'm a blunt person, but it's not painful for me to be blunt. It's painful for other people that I hurt by being blunt.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
She's saying it's painful for her to be so honest now.
Well, and all the evidence that they put forth, that they were kind of trying to tackle the evidence in the case, point by point, the trunk of the car, it was a Pontiac Sunfire. And they found remnants of chloroform in the carpet. The carpet in the back of the car. They found, of course, the smell of obvious human decay. I have smelt that smell. It is not something you ever forget.
How did you smell that smell?
My mother was a landlord, and we had a tenant that just disappeared. Oh, and we found her in her apartment. It was a suicide, And that's how I smelt that smell.
And
So
people say you never forget
you
it.
never forget it. You never forget it.
But what they have the defense attorney, the defense forensic expert saying it's junk science. Of course it's junk science. It's one of the strongest pieces of evidence against Casey Anthony. Of course you're going to call it junk science.
Exactly. And then
There's
the other
no balance in this documentary. They don't have the prosecution's forensic witness up there saying, no, it's good science because of blah, blah, blah. They just let these things stand as if they're the truth.
exactly.
Or
And then
you know what? I won't even go that far. That's actually maybe a
the
little
hair
unfair.
with the death bonding that was also found in the car. You don't get, there were strands of hair.
Oh, that's right.
That with the death
Of
bonding that
hair.
only appears after a corpse has entered the first stage of decomposition, you know, the hair follicles change. And that was found in that car. And then, well, of course, when they found the actual skeletal remains, and that was another thing, you know, it was found by a meter reader. He had called in, I think, 2 or 3 times saying that something was strange in this area when he went to read the meter, and it was flooded at the time because they'd had a hurricane, and nobody would come out and investigate. Well, when the waters finally receded and he found the skeleton, you know, what looked like a human skull, and they finally came out, at the trial, they even tried to make him out to be sinister, that maybe he did it, that he knew where this was all the time, even though he, and you know, they kind of asked him on the stand, how did you find that? Why were you out there? He says, I'm a meter reader. I was reading a meter. You know, and
it's so sinister, right? Yeah, those meter readers, watch out for them.
But you know, they were saying that when Kaylee was found, she was found wrapped in a Winnie the Pooh blanket that was part of a set that was on her bed. She was found in 2 plastic bags and in a laundry bag that was part of a set, which the matching one was found at the Anthony house. So, and then of course, the police were saying that when they unwrapped everything, there was duct tape around her mouth, or it had been around her mouth. It was kind of hanging loosely. And they found that same brand of duct tape at the Anthony house. Well, the way they tried to rebut that is that, okay, no. There was no DNA found on the tape at all. And it probably was on the outer wrapping. And when they unwrapped her, it just got around the face. Now, I'm not a forensics investigator, but that doesn't sound quite right to me.
No. He lucked out with Jose Baez, you know? It's like one of those Leslie Abramson like performances that you just kind of stand in awe of just for the sheer nerve of it. And yeah, the chutzpah. I mean, just unbelievable chutzpah. And she got him because the other women in the jail were saying, oh, get this guy. And she took their advice. It turned, I mean, I also, what also came out after the trial, and I don't know if this was ever proved, was that he was exchanging sex for payment. I don't know if that was
that was never proven, but it would not surprise me. Would not surprise me at all, given her track record with men. And you know, I'm not going to sit up here and, you know, SLUT shame people that, you know, have a active sex life.
I will.
But that was kind of her modus operandi.
I'm comfortable doing it.
That's kind of her modus operandi. So
yes, very much so. Very much so. I mean, she's into power and control. And you know, did you see that shot where she's like, I come here to take pictures. And she has her camera and she's taking these pictures that look like they'd be in like a calendar that you'd get at the laundromat that they give you every year, you know, those kind of things. Here's the picture of the pond. It reminded me of Jodi Arias. And I was like, what is it with these killers and their obsession with photography? And I was thinking, is it just about image, and that if they think that they can look a certain way, that they can get over how things present, if they present well enough, that they can hide this kind of really dark part of themselves?
Yeah.
I just found it interesting. There's so many parts, but there's one part where she talks about her father coming into her bed, and she says to you, and I thought she was talking about a romance novel. She said, he would move my hair back and then he would rub my back. It's like, I mean, rub my back. Like, it was like a romance kind of
Yeah.
description.
And as a survivor of childhood abuse of that same nature, except
Mhm.
I was abused by a female rather than a male,
Mhm.
you don't remember it like that. At least I don't. And I don't think anyone else I've ever talked
I've
to
never
remembers
heard that.
it like that. It's not something you want to remember.
Or talk about
Yeah. I don't
in
want to
that
talk about it.
way. I mean, there's just I encourage people to listen and hear what they hear for themselves. That's I had to listen a couple times. I was like, did I just hear that? That
Mhm.
is so
And those little
outrageous.
animations they did her no good. I mean, that was just like, this is just, where they would kind of animate, what
All
she
her
was.
lives were in a
Yeah.
giant file,
Yeah.
like the walls were all files and all her lies were in files. It's like, well, that's a good illustration of how many lies she told. A
Yeah.
giant room with many, many, maybe thousands and thousands of
Mhm.
lies. But she also says that her father used to suffocate her. And the interviewee, she's quick. She picked right up on that. She said, suffocate?
Mhm.
There's something else that you were accused of suffocation. Is
Mhm.
this a? It just seems like she's projecting her own in that way in that time her own behavior to her own child onto her father.
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh yeah, suffocate you. Yeah, they used to suffocate me till I passed out."
I'm not even sure that really. I'm not even sure of the medical truth of that. I mean, I'm sure, yeah, if you do, or you will pass out, but what's the resuscitation rate on that? Is that something you just wake up from? That doesn't seem quite right to
Right.
me.
Right. But she also says that she has seizures from post-traumatic stress. That's another thing I've never heard. Have you ever heard
Has
that?
anyone has anyone ever seen her have a seizure? You know, it's just like, is that another lie?
Right. But she will go down. That's her personality. Until you can get her, she will stay by the whatever the latest lie. And that's also very just thinking about this trend in America, how quick we are to believe a news story. Whatever the news story is,
Mhm.
there will be someone who will believe it, no matter how many times that story has changed. So it's gone from the nanny to her father to now her father is giving her instructions and telling her where to go and what to say and what to do. And she wasn't hiding her pregnancy. It was that her family agreed that she would lie about her pregnancy. So she was doing what the somehow it's like her family is like a
Hasn't
secret
she lied about being
mafia
pregnant
family.
to everyone? She even lied about being pregnant to Cindy, her mother, and just said, "No, I'm just a little bloated." I mean, and then she's told several tall tales about who the father is. First, she tried to blame it on Jesse Grunn, the man she was engaged to.
Mhm.
Then it was a former high school classmate that was killed in a car accident. And then there was another man she blamed it on that was also killed in a car accident. So a lot of car accidents around
Do we
Casey
know
Anthony.
who?
No, never proven. And now in this, she was raped.
Now she's right,
So,
which which is really and the very odd thing from Clint House's Tony Lazzaro, his roommate,
mhm,
who she was dating. He said she was such a great mother. This really that she was teaching Kaylee how to pronounce words with flashcards
mhm.
at 2. How do you do that at 2? Are they saying that Kaylee could read? What are on those flashcards, and how could you teach someone who can't read to pronounce something with flashcards? Would it be
I know.
like a picture of an apple and something else? Is it phonics? Like, I
I don't
mean,
know.
I'm old enough. I was taught phonics. I know they don't teach it anymore, but I don't know. I just thought that was a very odd thing.
Yeah.
Flashcards.
Yeah.
So, is she getting people? Are people having false memories or recreated memories, or are they lying for her?
Or they're like, yeah, the boyfriend refused, the former boyfriend, Tony, he refused to be interviewed. Jose Baez would not be interviewed. So it's just really strange that some of the key players did not come on this documentary. And it was kind of what I would call background players that did. So maybe they didn't get the full picture. They only saw her ever so often, or they just have false memories.
It's very odd. I really wish I had a camera for me watching this. I think it would be just as entertaining. I was like, I had to rewind. I was the most outrageous. She said that she didn't know what the defense was going to be. Jose Baez wanted her reaction in the courtroom to be real, so he didn't tell her what her defense was going to be, and never visited her in prison, and if or jail. If that's true, then she has a civil suit, some kind of suit
I'm
against him if she
pretty
paid
sure
him, wouldn't you think?
that
Or
might even
something?
be like,
Some
I'm
kind
sure
of
that's against
grievance
an
against his
attorney's
license?
code, if not unconstitutional in some way, shape, or form, for you not
Yeah.
to know what your own defense is.
That was out. That was just the whopper of all whoppers.
And they just skipped over the whole Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez thing because, you know, there was a woman by that exact name in Jacksonville, Florida that sued her way back when.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I was surprised they didn't blame Nancy Grace more.
Yeah.
I was really surprised in this documentary that they didn't bring it up. And I was wondering, do her parents have a civil suit? Are they considered public figures, and are they beyond being defamed? Because she's already was convicted in this case of lying to law enforcement.
And sentenced to time already served.
Right. It's like a nothing conviction, but
Yeah.
she says in it, I'm a convicted liar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And now believe every word I say because I'm now truthful. So truthful, it's painful. So now
I would love to know how much she got paid for this, because
do you know
I don't.
that she was paid?
I mean, I would assume she was paid something for this. I mean, or somebody was paid something for this. I mean,
It's a
I don't.
money grab in
Yeah.
all ways. And I thought what Nancy Grace said about it was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
She said, I'm not going to be watching it, but she said they're going to make a lot of money on this, because she said it's like going to see a snake at the zoo.
Mm-hmm.
I hate snakes, but I look at them, and that's the same thing. I didn't want to. I know that she's lying to me, yet even if I wasn't doing your live, I would still be probably watching this because it's an event. She hasn't really talked at this level, and she has to finally answer these lies.
Definitely cash grab, and you know, I think NBC went for it because they knew that people want to hear from her. She's never consented to an interview. You know, it was, you know, it's number one trending on Peacock and has been since its release. So that's the whole draw of it. But
it's sad because Netflix, they're being sued over making a murderer. They're also being sued over When They See Us, which isn't even a documentary. That's a fictional. I won't comment on that. I've done many episodes on my feelings about that in POS. But I don't think these lawsuits will kind of slow these documentaries down because there's just too much money.
yeah.
Even say you get sued 3 or 4 times, you still
subtract.
Probably, right.
You settle out of court with them, and you subtract that from what you made, and there's probably still a pot of gold left. That's the whole thing.
Oh.
And but just I didn't really learn any more from this documentary than I did watching watching the old case, reading the case files, or listening to any other true crime person that's ever covered this case. I didn't learn any more than I learned from them, except that she's still a liar. And that's
love
obvious.
the detectives, though. I love seeing the detectives just laugh at it. Like they
I
bring
know.
up George Anthony, and he said, why didn't you get his cell phone tower pings? Wouldn't that have been? It's like, because he wasn't the one out partying for 31. He wasn't the mother of the child out partying.
Yeah.
They bring up these things like a gotcha moments, and it was just I found some humor, and
also one of them said, and he wasn't the one that everything she told us the first 2 weeks, of the investigation was a total lie. That was her, and she can continue to lie even in jail. I mean, the people that she talked to in jail, she would tell them a different version of events. I mean, it makes me wonder if she has like, and I'm certainly not a psychologist or a counselor or anything, if she has some kind of disorder where maybe she actually thinks this is reality, or is she
Right.
just
And
a liar? I mean, I don't
by,
know.
by the way, these psychologists and psychiatrists, forensic,
Hmm.
are not above being fools. No one is.
Yeah.
I just got an article today about a guy killed his wife and burned her body, or that's the theory, in the backyard.
Hmm.
And he said, "Oh, someone else killed her." This is his new theory because he came up for parole today.
Hmm.
They were, and he said, "Oh, someone else killed my wife, and I just got rid of the body." And the forensic psychiatrist was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, this is the real story we're getting today."
Yeah. Uh,
I mean, that
it,
just doesn't make any sense. You don't cover up a crime you didn't do, especially when it's your wife.
um, the same with the Daybell Vallow case out in Idaho. Daybell actually had the audacity to tell the FBI and the Idaho Bureau of Investigation when they found the bodies, human remains on his property, that he didn't know how they got there. I'm like, really? Really?
Well, I was talk to Sean about Sean Fitzgerald, the actual Justice Warrior, about this documentary. I believe, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the part that really stood out for him was when she was explaining her tattoo, the beautiful life or the good life,
Mm-hmm.
and saying that was my way of talking about my family and it was me giving the middle finger to my family. And then she said, this other quote is my real Kaylee tattoo. This quote that has no. Meanwhile, her friend has a tattoo that says Kaylee right on her arm. He found that to be the most outrageous and unbelievable moment in the documentary. Do you have a moment that you think was just that made you kind of want to throw tomatoes or get up and yell at
It's
the screen?
when I caught her in that very first lie where she was talking about why she was no longer employed at Universal Studios. When I
Mm.
caught her in that very first lie, I was like, no, you're still lying, because I'm looking at the police report, the case file in my hand. It was the total opposite of what was in there. And I'm like, no, you're still a liar. You're just hoping people don't remember how many lies you told.
It's un, un, unreal, this thing. And I was trying to think, is the money worth it? I mean, I guess how much? I mean, it's
If
kind of
you
like the
have no
deal with the
other
devil. You know what I mean?
prospects, maybe. I mean, who's going to hire her besides her own defense team? I mean,
Mhm.
really. I mean, where's she going to go? What is she going to do? You
I
know,
just mean the filmmakers making this. Is it worth it to do this deal with the devil? And is anyone gonna? Does it matter if your work is never taken seriously if you make a fortune from it? I mean, and not just not taken seriously, but really doing something I find quite, and the majority of the public finds quite
I mean,
distasteful.
Kim
Basically,
Kardashian
being a baby
still
killer
Kim
apologist.
Kardashian still has an audience, and look all the
Great point.
all
Great
the
point.
freaking cases she's spearheaded to try to get off an obviously guilty perpetrator.
Some of the it seems like she goes for the worst case, the worst, guiltiest killers in the
Mm-hmm.
world. Kevin Cooper, Purvis Payne. I mean, she finds it's like she says, "Please, Innocence Project, bring me the guiltiest person."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Purvis Payne, in my mind, is the guiltiest human being I have ever come across. Not only was he witnessed by the neighbors, his arm shutting the door as he tried to murder the son, murdered the baby girl, and possibly assaulted, but definitely murdered the mother. He also was caught by a police officer covered in blood fleeing the scene of the crime. He ran into it. I mean, how much more guilty can you get?
Right.
But I'm working on a case in Michigan where they just let out a guy who was caught on film doing an armed burglary and ID'd by his father, and now he's innocent. So
Well, it's just
I
like
mean,
the murder of Paul Howe. They
right. Thank you, Julius Jones. Right. I
Julius
forgot
Jones,
Julius Jones and Paul House killer.
eyewitness.
Thank you.
The sister, her story has never changed in 20
Nope.
something years, and they just took every part of it and twisted it into something she didn't even say.
Right. With the hat and the
Hat and the
hair,
and
and she was a costumer, and so
yeah.
it's like my I'm not a particularly visual person, but my mother is. I would be the perfect eyewitness for a criminal. I would not remember anything visually. So definitely commit a crime near me because I will be your perfect eyewitness. Won't remember. But my mother and they will remember details like that. Just exactly, they're just so that made a lot of sense to me
My
when I
mother-in-law's
found that.
like that too. I mean, she's a
Really?
medical professional. She works in
Mhm.
medical research. So and she's like a fashionista. So not only could she tell you right down to the thread what kind of clothes they were wearing, she could tell them if she noticed they had any particular ailments, like he had a twitch or
Right.
you know.
She's like, looked like high blood pressure, possible diabetes,
Yeah.
Prada shoes. They'll get the guy like that
Yeah.
with me. I live in fear of them being like, what kind of make of car? Forget it. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, that's me. It was a white car and small.
I would be the perfect witness for any of these cases. Um, just, is there anything else that we missed?
No, I mean, I guess if you are I hate to say fan of the case, but if you followed the case,
Mm.
it's definitely worth uh, a look. It's definitely worth a look, just to kind of top off the case. Absolutely.
Oh, I know one thing. I was talking to you about. I did just a tiny little bit of research about filicide, which is parents who kill their children,
Hmm.
and apparently men and women kill their children at almost an equal rate. But they said that women who and that 72% in a one Brown study of the children who were killed were 6 or younger, and more often when mothers kill their children, they are often 18 years or younger. Did we just talk about this, or did we talk about this before we were on air?
Right before we went on
Okay,
air.
good. I'm just like, everybody's gonna be
Mhm.
like, "What? We just heard this 2 minutes ago." Anyway, I thought that was interesting because she was 18 when she was pregnant, 19 when she gave birth, like right in that age group. Not doesn't match it exactly as a year older, but and they said the most common reason is because they found their child a burden to the kind of freewheeling teen. I mean, you're still a teenager at that point, and she wanted to live the life of a teenager. And I found it interesting that she's still sort of teenager-esque. I found the way that she talked very teenager-ish and immature.
Absolutely. Well, it's pardon. I'm my own moderator.
I
Excuse
know.
me.
I saw you writing. Yeah.
But family annihilators in general fit the profile. Just like you said, women, they're either teenage parents that obviously don't want to be parents. They have financial problems. They have a history of jumping from relationship to relationship. A family annihilators male either are religious. They tend to be religious zealots. Christian Longo was a Jehovah's Witness. John List was a religious fanatic.
That's
Chris
interesting. And look
Coleman
what
worked for
happened to
Joyce
Chris Watts.
Myers.
Look
Yeah.
what happened to Chris Watts now that he's in
Yeah.
prison. Or maybe you get religion in prison after you do something like that. But
Yeah.
he's really gone
Absolutely.
full zealot in
And
prison.
they often believe that either their family is what's keeping them from their true life's purpose or their family has failed them in some way. And if you look at the thing, that's kind of the modus operandi.
There's one thing I want to say. Her language in this is really interesting. It seems like she's trying to mimic the what she's heard is the right thing to say. So she says about Kaylee. She said Kaylee was infectious to everyone she came across, which I think what she was trying to say or what she had heard was she had an infectious laugh or her joy was infectious, but she just said she was like it comes off like you take it literally. She was no, she said I actually wrote down. Kaylee was infectious in everyone's life.
Well,
What that? And then she said about the smell from her trunk. She said, I had garbage. I had garbage in that trunk. And that was the feeling I got about her daughters. That's what she
I
thought. An
don't
infection, like
care
a
what kind of
disease,
putrid
garbage.
garbage.
Yeah,
I don't
junk.
care if you have a rotted deer, deer cadaver where you've been hunting in the back of your car. It doesn't smell like a decomposing human body.
Right. They all, and the McCanns also said that they had dirty nappies and garbage in their trunk that they left open too. I mean, there's not a lot of
That case,
original defenses in this
I
case.
know they killed her. I know they killed her, but I don't have a theory as to how they
No,
did it, or I know they did it. I know in my heart they did it.
me too. I don't. I feel that way because of lots of different reasons, but I don't know. Lot of the cases I cover, I still don't know how exactly, and sometimes or why it happened. And you'll never know.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that we might never know the answer. Like Chris Watts. I mean, we've sort of pieced together what happened there from what he's told people in jail, what we've been able to piece together.
Do you know about
But
this new group of women online? I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll ask you.
about kind of what happened that night. But
Mhm.
unless that is the case, for every case, there's so much we'll never know. What
True.
happened, like the Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell case. We may never know exactly what happened there, but I'm pretty sure I know who did it. you
What do
know,
you think in that Chris Watts case? Then I'll ask you the question that I was planning on asking. Do you think told that writer that question that I don't know, you want to call her a writer, I don't know what else you want to call her. That he had planned it. What do you think about that? That he knew he was going to murder his wife and kids for weeks before, and he sent that picture with the doll with the cover over the
yeah.
doll. What do you think about that? What was that about?
I think he knew. Like, I don't trust that at all. I don't think he was planning it for months, weeks, but I think maybe he was planning it for a week, a few days, and he took his opportunity. I do think it was premeditated, but I think it was very poorly premeditated. I mean, he made every possible mistake you could possibly make if you're gonna, cover up a crime. I mean, he left her cell phone in the couch. He left her purse with all her medications and the children's medication sitting in the kitchen on the kitchen counter. Um, he
It was
left
the
her.
dumbest crime in the
I know
history of the world. I thought
he left her
you're
car
talking
in the
about Jeffrey
garage.
McDonald wasn't smart with the
No,
pigs and he put the murder weapons right outside the door of his house, and his story was dumb. But acid is groovy, kill the pigs. I mean, it sounds so crazy now. Also, with the time difference, not close to the Manson murders. But
yeah.
the Chris Watts, I mean, to bury your wife right where you work, and put
Like
them and the kids right where
just a
you
few
work.
inches deep, just enough to cover the body and to throw
Yeah,
your children down something you were responsible for repairing.
and his interrogation, his
Yeah.
answers are so dumb. I mean, it just why wouldn't he just lawyer up and just be like, look, it's suspicious, or do a better job? I just do talk about not getting away. But what I was going to ask you about Chris Watts, have you encountered the people, the women? They seem to all be women on YouTube
hmm
who are making, it seems like, endless amounts of videos supporting the theory of Chris Watts's original confession that Shanann killed the kids, which also seems is a plot to a movie that Chris Watts had seen a couple weeks before. Shanann had killed the kids and that he
hmm
killed her in revenge.
Well,
And
one of
they
the investigators put that idea in his head just to see if he'd bite.
he's such he I think he's one of the dumbest criminals cases I've ever looked at. I just interviewed Ruth Markel, the mother of Dan Markel. I don't know if you know that case, that Florida professor was some murder for hire case, and everyone in that he's Harvard educated. Everyone in that case, and his wife, who I believe is behind the whole her brother's just been indicted 6 months ago. It just keeps going on and on and on. It happened in 2014. So what I'm saying is everybody in that case is highly intelligent, and it's fascinating because of that and other reasons. But I was saying to my boyfriend, why are cases where the perpetrator or the killer is dumb are just as interesting as when they're really brilliant?
Yeah.
And for different like Chris Watts is just total. I don't know. I don't think I don't. I mean, is there a dumber criminal than? I mean, I guess. I mean, you could say there's Purvis Payne and things like that, but this, I really think he thought he was going to get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
He came in there like, "What? I would never do this." And then he was like watching those videos of his kids on his phone, knowing he was being watched, and he was like, "I would never do this, never." And he thought he would get away with saying he didn't have an affair. Like, what does he think? They're not going to look into it? Like, oh, he's a trustworthy person. He looks like a nice fella. Never mind. Nothing to see here. See ya. Like, what did he think was going to happen?
So, yeah, and I totally agree. Same thing with like the Chris Coleman case, the one that worked as head of security for Joyce Meyer that killed his wife and two sons. Told the investigators, "Oh, I'm not having an affair." Meanwhile, they've already gotten into his cell phone and found the name of the girl he was having an affair with and have the police in her hometown talking to her.
Why do that? Why do that? Why? It's like the first thing they want to know if your wife goes missing. Are you having an affair?
If you are married to somebody that dies under mysterious circumstances, you just better be prepared. You're going to be a person of interest, if not suspect number one.
What I've learned from this, from talking to you tonight, is I'm scared of ever meeting your mother and her crazy powers of observation. But what do you think the most interesting case, or what is the case that you just can't, like the case that you're just fascinated by, that you just can't get enough of?
Oh goodness, this is terrible. The Vallow case, of course, that's kind of the case that helped build my channel up. It's just so much because it has cults, it has everything in it, that it's just so interesting. But aside from that, I've been doing a whole lot of reading and investigating on the rise of the Third Reich. And I consider that like one of the worst crimes ever committed, what they did to 6 million people. And it's interesting psychological study of how an entire country of people could be so badly duped. And then I see parallels with what's currently going on, and it's scary. It's like a mass delusion almost.
Well, I'm old, so I remember a time when people used to say, "Oh, we're going to get a media like Russia," but I really feel like we have you get one news, basically the news is so uniform from one point of view, and for the things that I know about, which are the crime cases, so inaccurate. Where you get good coverage is the local press is still pretty good, I found, on crime cases, but the national press is so inaccurate and terrible, and doesn't mind propping up a killer for a killer and hurting victims. And
the national
them.
press is definitely entertainment.
Yeah,
it's for entertainment. I'm going to stop short of saying propaganda, though there's some of that too, but it's definitely for entertainment purposes, whereas your local media and independent media are still people that's in it to crack the story. I look at old newsreels of, Dan Rather, Walter Cronkite. It's an entirely different type of journalism that's going on right now.
Oh, yeah. We used to have the fairness doctrine. Yeah. So that if you have it's essentially what it means. If you have one political side on over 30 that has 30% or more support, you have to have the other side on. And we got rid of that. That was a great thing. It just doesn't. They can propagandize all they want and have. And it's funny because both sides will, the Fox News people will call the other side propaganda. The MSNBC people will call it. So it's like there's no kind of understanding unless you're listening to both sides. You
At
know,
least,
yeah,
Greg
you're getting a whole
Gutfeld is
different view of the
entertaining.
world. Yeah,
At least Greg Gutfeld's entertaining. I can't say
yeah, right, exactly.
anything
But
for
I
any of
mean,
the others, but
but you know, I come from a left-wing family. If you say Fox News, they say, "Oh, that's propaganda. That's propaganda." You know, that's that's their view of it. So,
so I get my news from local news, the BBC to a certain extent, the
mhm.
Canadian Broadcasting Company to a certain extent, but most of mine comes from independent journalists right here on YouTube.
We have some great. Oh, I think Andy Ngo is great.
Andy Ngo is
Barry
great.
Weiss, I like. Yeah,
Sean,
even
Actual
my
Justice
Andy.
Warrior, he's
Yeah,
great. I
yeah.
mean,
Oh, actually,
but
oh, Sean's great. Yep,
yeah,
and
I
very
mean, but he
accurate.
puts it right up front. Yes, I am right leaning, but I'm also just going to give you the facts. And if you fact check him, you'll find he's 100% accurate 100% of the time in what he says.
And that is hard to do with the amount of videos that he puts out.
Mhm.
I work really hard to be accurate, but I don't put out a video every day or every other day. I
I
don't
used
know.
to put
Does
out
he get?
3 a
I
week.
said, do you have elves working? What's
I know.
going on back there? How do you turn them out?
I used to
Um,
put out 2 to 3 a week, and now I'm down to 1, maybe 2 a week if I'm lucky. Because I've gone back to doing deep dives like you do, where a video of mine is anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half because I'm really diving in. And I'd rather put out a really good quality one than a bunch of them. I've just sort of changed my philosophy on that.
I think I'm gonna be making. I can't work at the pace that, that I have been going, so there may be a little bit less. There may be more live shows. I don't know what I don't
Yeah.
know, but there's going to be some changes. I think in the new year, I'm thinking about how to
Well,
make it
I,
more realistic. I'm make a more realistic schedule for myself.
I'm certainly very happy that you came on. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you
Had a
for having me.
wonderful
This was
time.
really fun.
Before you leave, tell the audience where they can find you, and I'll also post it in the description.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm a terrible self promoter. I'm trying to get
I
better.
am too. I'm terrible.
I'm at Roberta Glass Pod. I'm actually on Twitter quite a lot. If you want to know what I'm doing, you can find me there on Twitter. I'm on YouTube, anywhere where you find a podcast, iTunes, Spotify, et cetera, et cetera. Roberta Glass True Crime Report. Check it out. Thanks so much for having me. This was a real pleasure.
Absolutely. And we're going to be over on your channel next month talking about John Wayne Gacy.
Yes, that I'm very excited for that. I'm a little scared just about the subject about it.
But anyway, everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. I'll be back hopefully by the end of the week with another video. If not, I'll be back next week for sure. And with that being said, until next time, Keto and Krime out.